my brother said. You and your kid aren't welcome here anymore. I just said, okay. That night, I reviewed the documents for the house I'd been paying for. By morning, his access was gone. At noon, my phone rang. It was him panicking. My brother Marcus told me I wasn't welcome in his house anymore. The house I'd been paying for 6 years. And all I said was, okay. Now before you think I'm some kind of pushover, let me be very clear. That okay had teeth. That okay had paperwork behind it. And by the next morning, Marcus learned something important about what happens when you bite the hand that literally keeps a roof over your head. But let me back up. Because this didn't start with one sentence. My name is Renata. I'm 34, I have a 7-year-old daughter named Lily. And for most of my adult life I believed that family meant you showed up no matter what. You sacrifice. You bend yourself into shapes that don't make sense just to keep the peace. Some people interpret that kind of love as weakness. My brother Marcus was one of those people. Our parents, Patricia and Gerald, divorced when Marcus and I were teenagers. Messy doesn't quite cover it. Both of them used their kids as emotional support while they fell apart, which left me becoming the one who held things together and Marcus becoming the one who expected things to be held together for him. Sound familiar to anyone? By adulthood the pattern was set. I built a career in healthcare administration. Steady, unglamorous, mine. Marcus drifted. Different jobs, different cities, different excuses. Charming and funny, the kind of person who lights up a room and then disappears before he has to help clean it up. When our grandmother Nana Ruth passed away, she left behind a paid-off 3-bedroom house in Columbus, Ohio. She left it jointly to both of us, which, God rest her soul, was probably her one miscalculation in an otherwise very wise life. Marcus had just lost his apartment. He called me and did the thing he always did. Got vulnerable, got real. Ren, I just need a stable foundation. Give me a real chance and I'll get myself together. I promise. I believed him. I want you to understand that. I genuinely believed him. So I agreed to cover the renovations, property taxes, and utilities. Marcus would live there, stabilize, and eventually start contributing. We actually shook hands on it like a business deal, which in hindsight should have been in writing, and that mistake I will fully own. That was 6 years ago. In 6 years, Marcus contributed to that house exactly 4 times. Total. Counted. The amount he put in over 6 years was less than what I spent in a single month. And I kept paying. Partly guilt, partly love. Partly because Lily adored her Uncle Marcus. But honestly, partly because confrontation costs energy I didn't always have as a single mom working full-time. My best friend Simone kept telling me, Renata, this is going to blow up. Over wine, over coffee, over late-night texts. And I kept saying, I know, but it's fine for now. It was not fine. Last spring, I decided Lily and I would spend a long weekend in Columbus. I'd been seriously considering moving us there. Good school district, it made sense. Called Marcus ahead of time. He sounded a little off but said to come on down. When we arrived, I immediately understood why. Marcus had a woman living there. Her name was Cheryl. And Cheryl had opinions about the space. She'd repainted 2 bedrooms. She'd thrown out things that belonged to Nana Ruth. Things I had specifically asked Marcus never to touch. I sat down at the kitchen table and calmly explained that we needed to discuss the arrangement going forward. That I was thinking about spending more time there. Cheryl walked in halfway through and said, with remarkable confidence for someone who had paid exactly $0 toward that property, Marcus, are you really going to let her come in here making demands? And Marcus looked at me across that table and said, I think it's better if you and Lily don't come here anymore. This is my home. I need you to respect that. I looked at him for a long moment. Okay, I said. I took Lily to a hotel with a pool. Made it sound like an adventure. She was thrilled. 7-year-olds are beautifully easy to redirect. But that night, once she was asleep, I opened my laptop and started going through every document connected to that house. Do you think I should have said something right there in that kitchen? I've gone back and forth on it. But I knew that whatever I was going to do needed to be done right. Not loudly, but by 4 in the morning I hadn't slept, and I was strangely, completely calm. Marcus was about to find out what okay actually meant. Let me tell you something about property law that I wish I'd understood 6 years earlier. When you co-own a house and you've been the one covering every expense, every tax bill, every repair with receipts and bank records to prove it, you have options. Real ones. I'm not a lawyer, but I know how to read and I know how to find people who are lawyers. That night in the hotel room I went through everything. 6 years of bank statements. 6 years of payment confirmations. Property tax records. The utility accounts. All in my name, I realized, because Marcus never bothered to set anything up himself. The renovation invoices. All of it sitting in a folder in my email like a very organized case file that I had accidentally been building for half a decade. By morning I had sent one email. To a property attorney named, and I appreciated the irony, a woman named Diana, who a colleague had recommended to me months earlier when I'd briefly considered sorting out the house situation. I'd never followed through then. I was following through now. I also made one phone call. To my dad, Gerald. Now, my dad and we had our own complicated history. After the divorce, he'd moved to Cincinnati, and we'd gone through years of distance, physical and otherwise. But in the last few years, we'd genuinely rebuilt something. He wasn't perfect, but he loved Lily fiercely, and he'd always had a quiet respect for how I'd managed my life. I told him everything. The whole conversation with Marcus. Cheryl and the painted walls and Nana Ruth's things in a trash bag. There was a long silence on the phone. Then Dad said, "Renata, baby, that boy has been taking advantage of you since before your grandmother was even in the ground." Not wrong, Dad. He didn't tell me what to do. He just said, "Whatever you decide, I'm behind you." And honestly, that was exactly what I needed to hear. Not advice, just someone in my corner. Do you have someone like that? Someone who doesn't try to fix it, just stands next to you. Because I think that's rarer than people realize. Diana called me back within 24 hours. We had a long conversation and she walked me through something I hadn't fully grasped before. Because I had been paying the property taxes, the renovation costs, the utilities, all documented, all traceable, I had a very strong argument for what's called a partition action. Essentially, since Marcus and I co-owned the property but couldn't agree on its use, I could petition a court to either divide the property or force a sale. And given 6 years of financial records showing who had actually been maintaining the asset, the math wasn't looking great for Marcus. But Diana also pointed out something more immediate. The utility accounts, the insurance, the property tax payments, all in my name, which meant I had the ability to make changes to those accounts, immediately, legally, without needing a court date. "You don't have to do anything dramatic," Diana said. "But you have more control here than you think." I sat with that for a moment. Then I thought about Cheryl's face when she told Marcus to put me in my place. In my grandmother's kitchen. In a house I paid for. Dramatic was starting to sound pretty reasonable. I won't pretend I acted perfectly from here. I'll be honest with you. I made some moves that were calculated, and I'm not entirely sorry about them. First, I contacted the insurance company and had myself listed as the sole managing party on the homeowner's policy, which I had every right to do as a co-owner. I requested that any policy changes or lapses require my direct authorization. That was just good financial sense, frankly. Second, and this is where it got real, I called the utility companies. The electricity, the gas, the water. All in my name. I didn't disconnect anything. I'm not cruel. But I set up notifications so I'd know immediately about any account changes. And I flagged that no modifications were to be made without my approval. And then I had Diana send Marcus a formal letter. Certified mail. Outlining the financial history of the property, the documentation we had, and formally requesting either a conversation about a new arrangement or a discussion about buyout options. Certified mail, people. There's something about certified mail that makes things very, very real very fast. I went home to my apartment with Lily. Gave her a bath, made her favorite, grilled cheese and tomato soup. Put her to bed. Then I sat on my couch and I waited. Took less time than I expected. My phone rang at noon the next day. It was Marcus. I looked at that screen for 2 full rings before I answered. And I want you to imagine his voice. Because Marcus, who had coolly told me to stay away from that house less than 48 hours ago, sounded like a completely different person. "Ren." His voice was tight. "I got a letter. From an attorney." I said. What are you doing? What does this mean?" And I said very calmly, "It means I said okay, Marcus." There was silence on his end. And then, in a voice that was 1 part angry and 2 parts genuinely scared, "Can we please just talk about this?" "Oh, now we can talk." I told him I was willing to have a conversation. But on my terms, on my timeline, and with full transparency. No Cheryl on the call. Just us. He agreed immediately. Which told me everything about where the actual power in the situation had always been. I hadn't raised my voice once. I hadn't cried, hadn't begged. hadn't sent a single emotional text at midnight. I just quietly picked up the thing I'd been handing him freely for 6 years. And the moment I stopped, everything changed. How do you think that conversation went? Because I'll tell you, it was not what I expected. Not even a little. Marcus wanted to meet in person. Neutral ground, he said. Which I found a little rich, considering there was nothing neutral about a man asking for equal footing after 6 years of very unequal arrangements. Fine. Coffee shop in Columbus, Thursday afternoon. I brought a folder. Printed documents, highlighted, organized by year. I'm a healthcare administrator. Organizing chaos is literally my job. Marcus showed up alone. He looked tired. A little smaller somehow, the way people do when the confidence gets knocked out of them. He wrapped both hands around his coffee cup, and for a moment neither of us spoke. Then he said, "I didn't know it had gotten to this point." I looked at him. "Marcus, I've been paying for that house for 6 years. For contributions. In 6 years. I counted." He didn't argue with that. Which was something. What came out over the next hour surprised me. Not because it excused anything it didn't, but because it filled in some gaps. Cheryl had convinced Marcus that my financial involvement was a form of control. That I was using money to hold power over him. That he needed to establish boundaries or he'd never have his own life. I sat with that honestly for a second. Had I ever used the money as leverage? No. But I understood how someone who'd always felt like the lesser responsible sibling could be convinced of it by the right person pressing the right nerve. "She told you I was controlling," I said. "And your response was to tell me my daughter and I weren't welcome. In a house I pay for." He looked at the table. "Yeah. I'm not yelling. I just want us both to be clear on what actually happened." Here's where my dad comes back into the story. Without telling me, Gerald had called Marcus 2 days before our meeting. Apparently he'd said something that landed in a way my words never quite could. Maybe because it came from a father, or maybe because Dad had his own history of letting people down and recognized the road Marcus was on. He'd told him, "That woman has held this family together since she was 12 years old. Think hard about who you're becoming." I did not expect to tear up in a Columbus coffee shop. Yet, Marcus looked at me and said, "I've been unfair to you for a long time. Not just this. For a long time." I didn't immediately forgive him. "I know that might not be what you were hoping for. The music swells, siblings embrace, all is well. But 6 years of being taken for granted doesn't dissolve over 1 cup of coffee." What I said was, "I hear you. And we're going to need more than one conversation." I think that was the right call. What do you think? I also said this. "I never wanted the house to be a power thing, Marcus. I just wanted us to be actual partners in it." "I know that now," he said quietly. "Did you ever stop and ask yourself why I kept paying for 6 years? When you gave me almost nothing back? Did you ever wonder why I didn't just stop?" He shook his head. "Because I love you. That's the whole reason. No trick. That's it." He pressed his hand over his eyes and held it there. I didn't reach over. I didn't fix it. Some things need to be felt all the way through before they can change. We didn't resolve everything that day. The attorney situation was still open. What a fair arrangement looked like going forward. None of it was settled over coffee. But something real shifted. I drove home that evening. Lily was at Dad's for the weekend. And the apartment was quiet. I made dinner, sat by the window, and thought about how long I'd been holding things together. How tired that 12-year-old girl still was, somewhere inside me. Maybe this time something would actually change. Maybe. But I still hadn't dealt with Cheryl. And that was going to be its own situation entirely. One that even Simone didn't see coming when I told her what I was planning. Cheryl was 41, worked in real estate, which now that I think about it makes the whole situation even more insulting. She absolutely knew what she was doing moving into a property she had zero legal claim to. Confident, well-dressed. And she'd apparently decided within 5 minutes of meeting me that I was a problem to be managed. After my coffee with Marcus, I called Simone and told her everything. Simone was quiet through most of it, which meant she was thinking hard, which meant whatever came next would be either very wise or very dangerous. "So Marcus is sorry," she said finally. "What about Cheryl?" "That's exactly what I keep coming back to," I said. "Because Marcus didn't come up with that control narrative by himself." Well, he didn't. Here's what I knew about Cheryl that Marcus didn't know I knew. A few weeks after the Columbus visit, I'd mentioned the situation to a colleague named Brenda. Just venting, not gossiping, and Brenda had gone very still. "Wait, Cheryl, who does real estate in Columbus. Turns out Brenda's sister-in-law had rented through Cheryl 2 years earlier. Lease terms that didn't match what was verbally promised. A deposit that vanished. A small claims case that Cheryl settled quietly just to make it disappear. A woman with a pattern of treating other people's property like her own personal arrangement to manage. Imagine my complete lack of surprise. I didn't call Cheryl. Didn't confront her. I did something quieter and more effective. Diana sent a formal letter to the property address, addressed specifically to Cheryl, outlining that she was residing in a co-owned property without any legal agreement or documented permission from both owners. It noted that her modifications to the property would be factored into our ongoing damage assessment. Cheryl received that letter on a Tuesday. By Wednesday, Marcus called to tell me she was furious. "She's saying you're attacking her," he said. "I sent a legal letter to someone living in my house without my permission. That's not an attack. That's a document. Oz. She wants to talk to you directly." Every instinct said no. But a quieter instinct said, "Let her talk. Let her show you exactly who she is." "Fine," I said. One call. That phone call was one of the more remarkable experiences of my adult life. Cheryl opened confident, moved to aggressive when that didn't land, and then said, "And I'm giving you this one verbatim because I still cannot believe it. Some women just can't handle seeing their brothers move on and build something." I let her finish. Then I said very pleasantly, "Cheryl, I have 6 years of bank statements, a property attorney, and your name on a letter regarding unauthorized occupancy. You're welcome to continue this conversation with Diana directly." She hung up. I sat alone in my kitchen and laughed. Genuinely laughed. Because sometimes a situation is so absurd that laughing is the only appropriate response. I texted Simone, she hung up on me. 4 seconds later. Iconic. 2 weeks later, Cheryl moved out. Marcus called to tell me. His voice complicated. Relieved and sad and a little lost. Some things had come out about her rental history that he hadn't known. He'd started seeing things differently. "I think I was manipulated," he said quietly. "I think so too. And I think you let it happen because it was easier than facing the real problem. Which was that you've been avoiding responsibility for a long time, Marcus. And she handed you a story where that was my fault instead." He didn't argue. Just said, "I know." We talked for almost 2 hours that night. Really talked. The way we hadn't since we were teenagers sitting in the same chaos, before we learned to cope with it in completely opposite directions. He asked what I wanted to do about the house. And I told him. Clearly, specifically, without anger. What I said surprised him, and honestly surprised me a little too. But first, Lily. Because my daughter, completely unaware of any of this adult disaster, did something at her uncle's expense that was so perfectly timed it still makes me smile every time I think about it. Lily had been asking about Uncle Marcus for weeks. 7-year-olds don't understand complicated adult situations. They just know someone they love has been absent and they want to know why. Kept it simple. "Uncle Marcus and I are working some things out, baby." She accepted that with the magnificent indifference only small children can manage, and moved on to asking whether penguins could live in Ohio. But when Marcus came to visit us, first time he'd made the drive to our apartment, by the way, in all the years we'd lived there, Lily opened the door, looked at him for a long moment, and said with complete seriousness, "You made my mom sad. Are you sorry?" Marcus looked at me over her head with an expression I will treasure for the rest of my life. "Yeah, bug," he said quietly. "I'm really sorry." She studied him for another second, then stepped aside and let him in. "Okay," she said. "Do you want to see my hamster?" Just like that, fully resolved in Lily's court. 7-year-old Justice is something else entirely. Do you think she'd been planning that? Because I genuinely don't know, and it's been bothering me. Marcus sat at my kitchen table. My actual kitchen table, in my home that he'd never once visited. And we finally had the conversation I'd been waiting years for. I told him what I wanted to do about the house. I didn't want to sell it. I didn't want to force him out. What I wanted was a legal, documented co-ownership agreement. Real terms. His name on the utility accounts. A monthly contribution. Not enormous, not punitive, just real and consistent. And a clause that any future occupants required written agreement from both owners. That last one was aimed squarely at future Cheryls of the world, and we both knew it. Marcus listened to all of it without interrupting. Then he said, "That's more than fair, Ren." "I know," I said. which made him laugh. First real laugh between us in a long time. Diana drafted the agreement. Marcus reviewed it, signed it without negotiating a single term. And I chose to see that as genuine accountability rather than just defeat. Maybe I was being generous. But I think sometimes you have to decide which version of a person you're going to believe in. Dad came up from Cincinnati the weekend after the agreement was signed. The three of us, me, Marcus, Gerald, sat in my living room while Lily periodically ran through offering everyone crackers she'd arranged very seriously on a plate. Dad looked at both of us and said, "Your grandmother would be relieved." Not proud. Relieved. Which was actually more accurate and somehow more moving. We talked about the divorce, about those years none of us had fully processed, about how we'd all developed our particular damage in our particular directions and then spent adulthood bumping into each other with it. It wasn't a therapy session. It was just honest. Imperfect and overdue and honest. At one point Marcus said, "I think I spent a long time being angry at Ren for being capable." Dad nodded slowly. "And I spent a long time letting that happen because it was convenient for me too." That sentence landed hard in the room. Nobody rushed to fill the silence after it. I think that was the moment something genuinely healed. Not fixed. Healed is different from fixed. Healing means the injury was real and it takes time and sometimes it aches. But it was moving in the right direction. Simone took me to dinner the following week and demanded a full debrief. I told her everything. The letter, the call, Cheryl hanging up, the agreement, Lily's front door interrogation. By the end she was shaking her head slowly. "You know what you did," she said. "What?" "You stopped being the person who holds everything together and became the person who decided what she was and wasn't willing to hold. That's different." I thought about that for a long time afterward. She was right. And it hadn't required yelling or ultimatums or a dramatic confrontation in a driveway. It required paperwork, and patience, and a very well-timed certified letter. Not exactly the revenge fantasy you might have imagined, maybe. But honestly, watching someone's false confidence dissolve into a panicked phone call, that was plenty satisfying. Marcus and I talk every week now. He's been consistent with the house contributions. 7 months and counting, which is already 6 months and 3 weeks longer than his previous record. He calls Lily on Sundays and they have long ridiculous conversations about her hamster and whatever animal facts she's currently obsessed with. It's not perfect. We're not a Hallmark movie family and we never will be. But we're real and we're trying, and after everything that feels like more than enough. Nana Ruth left us that house because she believed we could figure it out. It just took us a little longer than she probably hoped. And me. I'm still the responsible one. But now there's a signed legal document that says someone else has to show up too. I'll take it. If you made it this far, thank you. Genuinely. This wasn't the easiest story to put out there. And I went back and forth about sharing it more times than I can count. If any part of this felt familiar to you, if you've been the one holding things together while someone took that for granted, I really hope you know you're not alone in it. Drop a comment and let me know what you thought. Was I too soft on Marcus? Too hard on Cheryl? Would you have handled any of it differently? I really want to know. This community means a lot and your perspective matters to me. And if this story resonated with you, a like goes a long way. It helps more people find it, and honestly it tells me you want to hear more. Thank you for being here. Take care of yourselves.